Today we paint another miniature via our Double Slapchop Plus speed painting technique.
You are busy with real life. You do not have the time to paint one miniature, much more an entire army. Drawing and painting need a warm-up. You need to start with loose sketching. When it comes to drawing, you need to warm up and feel good before you proceed to inking. Similarly, in miniature painting, I feel the same. I usually start painting the base or an old model before painting the actual miniature. Our Double Slapchop Plus painting method is similar in this regard. You start with a very relaxing technique in dry brushing, then speed paints. By the time you do the second round, you should be happy with your progress, or at the very least warmed up already. Now, by the time you paint the highlights, your brush control and eyes have adjusted to painting tiny details and areas. So if you are busy, but want to paint good-looking miniatures, this video, heck, this channel is for you. Oh, also, watch until the latter part of this video as we paint with a few colors from the new John Blanche Masterclass collection.
Hi, I'm Don. Welcome to my channel. This channel is supported by all these awesome brands. Also, special thanks to The Army Painter for making this video possible. As usual, we start with the Zenithal-ish prime. Zenithal-ish because most of the time I just spray can it with black primer and then spray can with gray primer and then spray can with white primer. The gray and white are sprayed mostly from the top. And then I finish off with white dry brushing.
We start the painting of the base to set the mood of sorts. We are using dusk red, which is a beautiful, cool and dark purplish red color. For the first round of slop chop, it is okay to be sloppier than usual. You may even flood the miniature a little more to establish the shade areas even better. However, do not flood too much to the point of losing details. One of the most important parts of speed painting is to pre-select your colors. My main army is Death Guard, and you might have noticed last year that I even retouched previously painted Death Guard miniatures. I did some retouching to match units that look different from each other too much and to familiarize myself with what colors I like for my Death Guard army. I like using aged hide for the fleshy parts of my Death Guard. It gives me the contrast and reddish flesh tone that I like. Aged hide also looks great as an underpainting for peachy flesh later in the second round. Now we paint the underpainting of the green armor. We are using Camo Cloak. This is a dark olive green color that looks good as underpainting for brighter green colors in the second round. Notice in the video that I was trying to leave the armor trims white at the start, but eventually decided to just paint over the trims and gray cables to speed up the painting. Trying to leave small details in white slowed me down a bit. Camo Cloak is a nice color even if you have no plans to do double slop chop. Single slop chop in this color and some quick highlights with Warpaint's Fanatic should look good. Not as good as double slop chop though. You'll see later in this video how double slop chop allows us to quickly have pre-highlight or at the very least brighter mid-tones in our painting. Now we use Pallid Bone. Pallid Bone is my most used speed paint and this bottle is almost empty soon. I need to get a new bottle or worst case lie to you guys, show this 2.0 bottle and use Pallid Bone 1.0. Pallid Bone has weak highlights and the mid-tones are just perfect. I am even thinking of using this as a general wash for a whole miniature to give it a sepia finish. But again, I am running too low to do that. Now, we are using Ruddy Fur as underpainting for all the wood and armor parts. This reddish orange brown should be a nice underpainting for the metallic paints later. Hardened leather is also a good option but is more saturated. Ruddy Fur looks more neutral or low-key, and besides I am running low on hardened leather too. Now we use Ancient Honey and Pastel Seafoam. Both are pastel colors that have fairly good mid-tones. Pastel-colored speed paints lack the contrast that regular speed paints produce, but are great base or even highlight paints due to their opacity and coverage. That rounds up all the speed paints that we used as underpainting for our first round of slop chop. Now we have a good foundation for the second round of speed paints. You have to let these speed paints dry before proceeding to our second round of slop chop. You may use a hairdryer immediately once the speed paints have settled in the crevices and details. The hairdryer also force cures the paints before dry brushing.
Once you're happy with your first round of slop chop, we do the process over again. And we dry brush with white paint again, mostly from the top, mostly from the highlight areas, and then let that dry and then apply more speed paints.
Now we do our second round of slop chop. I'm using my Foxbite Hobbies Goat Hair Dry Brush. The Army Painter Masterclass Dry Brush is also good. The awesome coverage of the War Paints Fanatic Matte White helps with dry brushing multiple thin layers. Because of the very good coverage, you will see the buildup of your dry brushing really well. You should only spend a couple of minutes with the dry brushing. More than a couple of minutes means you are unloading the white paint too much. Unloading paint too much will actually look better, but is more time consuming. At this point of the painting process, we have roughly spent around 20, maybe 30 minutes of painting. Drying time varies so much, but I live in the Philippines, where we have the perfect weather for painting in my opinion. Now we are using Peachy Flesh. This is my go-to flesh-colored speed paint, especially these days for double slop chops. Peachy Flesh looks best in 2 passes, whether it be the usual single slop chop or our double slop chop. If you do not plan to paint highlights though, I recommend you only apply the second pass of Peachy Flesh on the shade areas. This is to prevent the highlight areas from becoming darker than you like. Similar to Peachy Flesh, we paint palette bone in the same areas. Make sure you push excess speed paint on shade areas to create more volume. In real-life painting, you should start with the green armor and paint your way up the layers of elements. However, for YouTube monetization purposes, I am painting the green armor as late as I can. This is a similar technique done by big channels wherein you watch and look at their faces more than their actual painting. Notice that the second round of slop chop is faster, or at the very least more efficient than the first round. You may limit your choice of colors to brighter colored speed paints, which will almost always yield good results. If you have no plans of highlighting later, you may thin down more saturated speed paints in this second round with speed paint medium to give you more control. Now we paint warrior skin over the armor parts. Warrior skin has weak highlights, but midtones and shades are very nice. This color will give us a nice foundation for the metallic paints later. Warrior skin to Peachy Flesh is like bony matter to pallid bone. Can be an option or a nice shade color for the latter. We want the armor trims to be dark as it will serve as a nice base and shade underpainting for the metallic paints later. Similar to the armor trims, we want the base to be darker. This is to create nice contrast with the OSL later. Now we paint the green armor parts. If you are still watching at this point, thank you. We are using Ghillie Dew. This is a very bright yellow-green color that can be too bright when used in a single slop chop. This is perfect for our double slop chop though, as the underpainting will make the shade areas darker. Our last color is Plasmatic Bolt. Similar to Ghillie Dew, this color looks better in our double slop chop method. This color is bright and works well with underpainting. Now that rounds up the speed paints for our second round of slop chop. You may apply another pass of the same speed paints but thin down with speed paint medium and limit the application on the shade areas to give more contrast. However, to make our painting more efficient, we are now using War Paints Fanatic washes. We are using new washes from the John Blanche Masterclass collection. These washes are very, very nice, and so are the other paints that belong to both the Volume 1 and Volume 2 collection. We are using warm skin shade on the flesh parts. This wash is slightly similar to strong skin shade but is warmer and less dark. Perfect especially if you have no plans of layering more highlights. Our next wash from the John Blanche Masterclass collection is the Voodoo shade. This is slightly similar to soft tone wash but is darker. This wash gives a darker shade and contrast to scrolls and skulls than the soft tone wash. If you do not have the John Blanche paints yet, other than the soft tone wash, the light tone wash will also work. Albeit the light tone wash has more saturation than the Voodoo shade wash. The next wash from the John Blanche Masterclass paint collection is the Grimdark Shadow wash. Grimdark Shadow is perfect for everything. Grimdark Shadow is similar to the dark tone wash but not as dark. The Grimdark Shadow is a slightly warm dark gray wash. You can see in the video that we are applying this Grimdark Shadow wash on the armor trim parts and other metal parts. Like I said earlier, we want a dark underpainting for the metallic paints. The Grimdark Shadow wash gave us darker details and recesses, and thus improving the contrast even more. Now we can call this done, and it only took us less than an hour at this point. But I want to paint some details and some quick highlights to finish.
Now, if you're getting value out of this video, do give this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel. Now, once you're happy with the double slap chop, you could now add highlights if you want or some glazes to finish off the model. This is why I call it Double Slapchop Plus. The plus is the painting of the highlights and the refinement and painting of the details of the miniature.
Now I switch to my premium Foxbite Kolinsky brushes. It is important to note that Kolinsky brushes are not created equal. I just tried a local Philippine brand Kolinsky brush and it was not good. At this point, we have only spent an hour in the painting of this Tallyman miniature. That includes the drying time. Now to make the painting more efficient, notice how I paint the highlights. We all know that the Warpaints Fanatic by the Army Painter has insane coverage. I am biased, but this is just fact. Now, because of the crazy good coverage, notice how I practically paint the highlights like I am drawing. Sketchy and almost always in just one pass. Efficient stuff than highlighting with paints that have weak coverage. Don't get me wrong, I like weak lazy coverage when layering sometimes, especially when I want to take my dear time in painting a miniature. But when it comes to highlighting, much more if you are into Warhammer's edge highlighting, good coverage, even if thinned down, is key to efficient painting. Now we have another Warpaint Fanatic paint unique to the John Blanchett collection, Ivory. I used to paint for Vallejo, and this color was my go-to final highlight color. But I switched to Brain Matter Beige, since I switched to paint exclusively with the Army Painter paints. We are finally painting with metallic paints. Notice how I paint metallics here. To make the painting more efficient, I am only painting the metallics as pre-highlight and or highlight colors. I am painting the metallic paints like they are scratches and dents. Broken edge highlighting to show wear. I am guilty of experimenting too much on painting metallics in my older videos, to the point that I am making unnecessary complexities. But here, you see that with a nice dark underpainting and painting the metallics as highlights, we come up with fairly good results. Now we finish off the painting of this miniature. We just need to paint a couple of OSLs. Key here, as always, is to pre-select your colors. I am using colors from the teal triad that matches the tones we used in our double slop chop to refine the flame at the top back of this Tallyman. No glazing or airbrush was used in the painting of the OSLs. Just quick and simple layering to finish within 2 hours. Once happy with my teal flame, I then immediately proceed to paint the candle OSL with colors from the orange triad. Painting the molten lava base or foundation color took roughly around 5 minutes. The molten lava painting was the longest part since oranges, yellows, and reds have weaker coverage in the Warpaints Fanatic range. Weaker coverage for Warpaints Fanatic is practically strong coverage for most brands though. Once I painted the molten lava, I stippled the succeeding colors, and like I said, since these colors have weaker coverage, the blending is easier as I built up to the lighter colors. Now we are just painting the Tallyman writing on his scrolls to finish. The paints used here are also from the John Blanche Masterclass collection.
Now, before my final thoughts, a huge thanks to all my patrons at Patreon, Hajime Model Studio, and of course, the Army Painter for making this video possible.
And we are done within just 2 hours of painting. I am so biased, but I think that this time, even without the plus part or the painting of the highlights, our painting looks fairly good. I think this is so because we are confident that no matter what, our double slop chop will serve as a very nice foundation for any amount of highlighting. This painting is also extra efficient since I did not highlight too much after the double slop chop. The painting of this Death Guard Tallyman is a very good warm-up before we paint the huge Mortarion model. However, I think Morty can wait since that painting video will look too similar. Maybe we can paint black armor via our Double Slapchop Plus first. Tell me at the comment section below. Key to painting fairly good-looking miniatures is efficiency, may it be with speed paints or war paints fanatics. I like our double slop chop method more than my old sketch and glaze painting at this point. I feel more people find double slop chop perfect for their busy schedule, and I think it is obvious that our double slop chop is better than single slop chop. Lastly, do not be afraid to try incorporating OSL into your miniature painting. You saw that OSL can be just basic layering. No need for an airbrush or even glazing. OSL adds so much interest to any miniature painting.
That's it, Pansit. I hope you like this video. Do like, comment, subscribe, and all that stuff. Until next video, guys. Bye! Now, if you like this video, do check out these other videos.